Before 1969, Washington viewed the Cold War through a strict moral lens. It was a rigid standoff between American democracy and Soviet communism, framed as a struggle between absolute good and absolute evil. Treating every dispute as a battle for the soul of humanity left no room for compromise. This ideological purity resulted in constant diplomatic stalemates, where both sides remained frozen in place with weapons drawn. Henry Kissinger challenged this deadlock in 1969. He achieved a rare consolidation of power, serving as both National Security Advisor and Secretary of State simultaneously. He introduced a philosophy called Realpolitik. This approach stripped away moral and ideological concerns to focus entirely on cold, calculated national interest. Kissinger argued that global stability relied on a carefully managed balance of power between rival states, rather than mutual trust. To increase U.S. leverage, Washington had to become willing to negotiate with its worst enemies whenever the strategic math favored American interests. By the early 1970s, the United States faced a primary strategic goal: weakening the Soviet Union's global position without triggering a direct military conflict. Kissinger utilized secret diplomacy to bypass domestic political resistance, making a classified trip to Beijing in 1971 to open a hidden channel with the Chinese government. In 1972, the United States officially opened relations with Communist China. This meeting ended decades of diplomatic silence and forced a total reorganization of Cold War alliances. This birthed triangular diplomacy. By connecting with Beijing, Washington could play the communist giants against each other. Fearing isolation, the Soviet Union moved to ease tensions with the U.S. to avoid exclusion. This shift led directly to major U.S.-Soviet agreements, including the first strategic arms limitation talks, which significantly reduced nuclear tensions. Using secret channels and triangular leverage allowed the United States to divide its adversaries while multiplying its own influence. In the context of the Vietnam War, Kissinger treated diplomacy as a tool to shift leverage rather than a means of finding common ground. He orchestrated the 1973 Paris Peace Accords at this table, aiming to halt the conflict and facilitate an American withdrawal. Kissinger used the negotiation process as a strategic weapon, grinding down the opposition to extract the United States from an exhausting war. While the move was highly controversial, this cold calculus earned him a Nobel Peace Prize later that year. In the Realpolitik Playbook, peace agreements are tactical tools for national preservation. After the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, the Middle East faced a new crisis. Kissinger had to mediate while the warring factions refused to sit in the same room. He utilized shuttle diplomacy, flying continuously between rival capitals to mediate directly with each side in isolation. By acting as the sole intermediary, Kissinger controlled the flow of information. He de-escalated the regional crisis without ever requiring his enemies to meet face-to-face. Executing this strategy required Kissinger to live and work aboard an airplane, maintaining absolute control over every detail of the mediation. He built a calculated relationship with Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, moving Egypt away from the Soviet sphere of influence. Simultaneously, he maintained a parallel relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir to ensure American interests were represented on both sides of the conflict. Shuttle diplomacy prevented further immediate combat while establishing the United States as the central broker in the Middle East. By 1975, the rigid geopolitical landscape of 1969 had dissolved. The two-sided standoff of the early Cold War was replaced by a more complex reality. Washington now sat at the center of a fluid web of international relationships, actively managing connections between rival powers. Through these calculated strategic pivots, the United States was firmly positioned as the primary manager of the entire global power structure. Maintaining this system required constant management of global levers and a supreme level of diplomatic flexibility. Securing permanent American leverage remained the primary objective of the Realpolitik era, outweighing the pursuit of global harmony.